what is up, Rad Potential YouTube, and welcome to today's video. We've got the RADX7 at what I'm going to call my home track, which is National Corvette Museum Motorsports Park. I've already been out for effectively the warm-up session and then half of one 30-minute session. So running with Binge track days today. If you've never ran with those guys, definitely go check them out. Super cool crew of guys, very laid back, very focused on safety and having fun and learning. So with the RADX7, we're definitely learning today. Y'all didn't come along for the ride at the Polecat track day, but let me recap some of my issues that I've been having with the car that are basically exacerbated today. It's even worse today, but we'll manage. So as you can see, I have probably filled this catch can up again. And I emptied it after the warm-up session. The oil level in this car, because I don't have any baffles in my oil pan or any baffles between effectively the oil fill and the catch can. So between here and here, there are no baffles except for there. So oil, whenever I take a hard right turn, all the oil sloshes to the left side of the engine, goes up the fill tube, and then when I crack the throttle, the boost pushes all the oil into the catch can. So it's not really so much like a fuel and oil mixture that's going to be in there, but it'll be straight oil. So we'll empty it here in a second. And you can see I've already made a little bit of a mess, so I'm happy I pulled off after 4 or 5 laps. In addition to oiling issues, I've been having fuel slosh issues. I kind of expected to have fuel slosh issues using the stock tank with just my pump in there, but not as bad as what I'm having. So effectively, after my 20-minute warm-up session where I did 5 laps, on the 5th lap it was fuel sloshing, and I couldn't taking a hard left corner, so the opposite of my oil problem. All the fuel sloshes away from the pump, fuel pressure drops to 0 coming out of a corner, and when I cracked the throttle, I got no power. So we're gonna have to add a surge tank. We're gonna have to put some baffles in the oil pan, or baffles for a better catch can setup. And then in addition, all the issues with the RADX7 is my cooling system. So today it's gonna start to warm up, and ultimately the reason I pulled off from this session, which is the second one of the day, it's a perfectly beautiful day. It's probably 70 degrees right now. Sun's coming out, but it was 50 this morning. And I was pushing about 228 degrees water temps. Now if I let off the throttle and just coast for a straightaway or two, it comes right back down to 200. But ideally I'd like to see that number stay around 180 to 190 and not really creep up. Intake air temps are flawless. Oil temps right in that 220 mark as well. So I think just a bigger radiator with more coolant capacity is going to help me out a lot. And then I need to just block off one of my caps. So right now with the stock RX7 radiator for the 79, the cap is on the radiator. With the FC engine, I'm running this taller water neck here because I've moved the radiator down and forward. So I need a place up here to bleed it. So this is where I effectively bleed the coolant system, but there's 2 caps. So that one's got a lower pressure than this one. So in theory, all my coolant when it gets hot should push out of that. And then moving over here, you can see my overflow is simply like a Powerade bottle, which is less than ideal. And you can see it's filling. So these hoses run all the way to the bottom of it, so it should suck a lot of that back up. As far as everything else, no major oil leaks. I think my oil pan is sweating a little bit of horsepower, but it's literally negligible compared to the oil that shoots out of my catch can when it's full. As far as handling, I lowered the car about 2 turns on my coilovers, and we're gonna go back in time, and I'm gonna show you some videos kind of between Polecat and this track day of me fixing some small things on this. And I've discovered there's a decent amount of things that I don't like about these coilover sleeves on the front. They just kind of don't fit tight. My camber plates have a little play in them. I'm just not that fired up. So let's go back in time and check that stuff out, and then we'll come back here for some more laps in the RADX7. This thing sounds sick. It rips. And I don't know that I'll be faster than the RX-8 today, but we're gonna try. The fact that this sleeve wiggles around like this, I don't think that that is helping my front end clankiness. Upon visual inspection, sway bar end links are still tight, tie rod ends are still tight, lock nuts and everything on my lower control arm and my compression rod in the back, everything is still tight. Nothing wiggles around that way. You know, my rotor wobbles just a little bit, but that's because it doesn't have any set screws in it. Not a huge deal, but I don't know if that little noise I'm hearing there is my strut moving inside the tube, or if it is simply the strut action. You can see on the chrome part as I push this up that there is a small dead zone there at the bottom. Moving over to the passenger side, I think I have found the same problem. So you can see my strut tube nut right here has come loose. This coilover sleeve looks completely wrecked based on the spring contacting it. So the ability for this coilover sleeve to wiggle, just like the other side does, has caused some excessive wear. Now, I would never end up having my car rally stanced out all the way up here, max ride height, the whole deal. So this isn't a huge deal, but I'm still just not super fired up about the fitment of these sleeves to the strut tube.
Trying to kill the car today. It's just a find out what isn't working so that next year we can come back with full rate. So I was at 228. Water temp coming off the track there. I'm already down to 215. So I think just a little more volume in that system and it won't get as hot. But that should be a pretty good little flying lap in there. The other thing is that I am definitely not in enough upper body strength shape to drive this car at full rage for 30 minutes. I've only got like 5 or 6 laps in me and then I'm tired. So with moving everything, it's just been a nightmare to try to stay in perfect shape the last month. So and I'm just going to get used to sawing at no power steering, and it's a man's car to drive on the track. No power steering, no nannies, no nothing. overall pretty happy with it so far. Got a little bit smooth idle after a rip, means we still got all our apex seals.
Alright guys, so here's one of my issues with my catch cans. So if you can see what this is my oil fill cap and the fill tube extension piece. So in order to run the Turbo 2 intake manifold and that like Greddy, or I guess is that the Greddy one? The Rotary Works, whichever elbow I have, where I have my intercooler pipe coming across, I can't fit a standard like tall tube like what would be on a Turbo 2, right? Because they have the intercooler pipe actually turns back towards the firewall to go around the fill tube. On an FD, they have a little 2-bolt flange on this in the center iron, and then the oil filler neck kicks forward and then goes up. So I just shortened mine. Well, what's happened is it rattled out of the engine and it's pushing oil out of the interface between the iron and this. So I'm making a mess basically, and I need to engineer a better solution for this. So look forward to finding out a better way, or maybe I'll JB weld this in there, or I don't know. It likes to spin. Typically I just like put a spot weld, little tack weld on them, and then hammer them in there, and then they stay in there, but it doesn't solve the fact that oil can come out of that. So we'll see. Also, this is my catch can draining station. Let me put this back together before we go back out. Among all the other issues we had to fix on the car before we got here, always something to fix. Phew. At least we got a good rust prevention plan going on for the RADX7. Leak oil everywhere. Car will never rust. Especially with moving to Indiana, they like actually salt the roads in Indiana, so I'm gonna have to park all of my cars for 4 months. It's gonna be great. It's crazy. Engine oil pan leak, one thing. Catch can explosion. Oil everywhere. But that's what shakedown days are for. Session number 2 was a mad success, except for one small thing. I accidentally money shifted from 3rd back to 2nd on the backstretch, and I believe, let me turn my ECU on here to see my max RPM for the day. I'm pretty sure that I peaked 9,200 RPM out of this deal whenever I made that mistake. Fortunately, the RX-8 transmission took it like a champ, because RX-8s, you'll rev those to 9,500. But it was a not pleasant experience in the car whenever that happened. Otherwise, I think as far as transmission and drivetrain stuff goes, I need to improve. I've got a light driveline vibration at about like, it's speed dependent, so it's at a probably 120. A little bit of a driveline vibration that I'm not too fired up about, so top of 5th gear. And then honestly, this shifter, I don't know if I need to change the ball, because the ball is kind of big and it's not weighted, so it's pretty light, or if I need to actually get an aftermarket shifter. This is just a stock RX-8 shifter. I know they make like a different shifter plate, which is the guide plate for these, to prevent you from going into reverse, which is down and over. This is a Series 1 RX-8 trans, but something's got to change in here. I'm just like not feeling the shifter. In my RX-8, the shifter feels really good, but I'm curious if the fact that the RX-8 transmission in an RX-8 sits so much further down that you only have about 4 inches of the shifter coming up through the floor, and with that big rubber shift boot that's on there, it kind of stabilizes the shifter a lot better. So I don't know if that's something for me to look at. I mean, this literally has a rubber shift boot around the base of this, which is a 1st gen one that I cut to fit around the base of the RX-8 trans, and then I have this race quip like fireproof deal on here, just for mostly aesthetic. But definitely needs some improvements here. That's been, you know, in addition to fighting my brake bias, which I don't think I've mentioned yet, is I've got a little bit too much front brake. I'd like to bring more rear brake in. So one of our winter projects is going to be doing a pedal like a hanging or a floor mounted pedal box in this car just to eliminate all the issues. But my biggest lack of confidence so far is braking. That's where I'm just not too confident in the pedal. It's a firm pedal, but just I don't quite have the modulation and control that I wish I had. Otherwise, this thing flat frickin' rips. And I'm so stoked. So I ran a 230.1 in the last session, which is about 2.8 tenths of a second slower than the RX-8. The RX-8 ran a 227.3. So I'm amped to try to get this thing into the 220s. If I can run a 229 today, I'll be fired up. Somebody left a bunch of debris on the track, so one of my sessions got canceled. So I think I only have 1 or 2 left for the rest of the day. The car really doesn't take to doing a full 30-minute session, so I've been emptying my catch can every time. So far I've filled up about this much of a Dr. Pepper bottle after 1 session, so, you know, still trying to dial in this whole non-baffled oil pan, and I think we're just going to have to baffle it. Over the winter, we'll pull the oil pan off and either buy a nicer one, or we'll build something inside that oil pan to make it so it can't slosh up the fill tube. Little wasp guy. Okay, vacate the premises. Alright, wasp friend. Anyways, baffled oil pan for sure, bigger catch can for sure, and some sort of a new fill net, because ultimately filling up the catch can in 4 laps is less than ideal. Car still makes oil pressure. In addition to, I need to duct my radiator and get more coolant volume. In 4 laps I can get it to 228. It cools right back down, and it is a little hot today, but I'm really not spinning enough RPM to outdrive the factory water pump pulley. Maybe. Woo! Alright, get out of here. Get out of here. Getting attacked. Hopefully he's not in my hat. That would have been not fun. But I don't think I'm overdriving the water pump pulley. So if you remember on the RX-8, I had to put a bigger water pump pulley on because I was spinning too much RPM, that I was driving the water pump out of its efficiency range. So with this one, I don't think that's the case. I'm only really revving to like 8,000, and maybe it is, but maybe it isn't. Maybe the fan is dragging and the belt's slipping. There's a lot of improvements to be made to the RADX7 after today, but today was 100% necessary in order to grow and figure out the car. So we've got to get this thing working a little bit better, but in order to figure out what you need to improve, you got to go figure out what's not working. So let's jump out for another lap. I'll show you the best lap out of this next session. Hopefully we get into the 220s. It should be a super fun day. I'm just so stoked to be at the track. It is beautiful, 70, 80 degrees. Everybody's having fun. It's a good day.
this thing is all in the mail. Just feeling it out. There's lots of room for improvement. I also noticed I did hit a fuel cut. Basically like coming out of turn 10 a little bit. Whenever I was a sharp left-hander, I laid into it third and hesitated. We'll see if it idles. Idling dead smooth. That means we still got all 6 apex seals. Get fired up. Honestly, guys, for effectively just being like the first real shakedown of this deal at a place that I know, this thing is ripping. Shoo! Alright, moment of truth. Lap timer. Did we get a 229? Dang it! 231.4. I guess I only did 3 laps. I got one good one. The other 2, because I didn't finish this one, so it would have been my 4th. Less than ideal. But, you know, it's part of it. Got to have a reason to come back to the track. And definitely going into the 220s is one of those. Deep into the 220s next year with aero and all sorts of other stuff. A really nice surge tank. A floor-mounted pedal box. You know. We'll make this thing nice. Not that it isn't nice, but nicer. More performance. Listen to that. All 6 apex seals after a track day. Who's stoked? This guy is. So, made it back to the house. Or I guess I say, not the Rad Ranch. We're at my parents' house. Which is where fortunate to have a little bit of extra space to store a few of the cars while the Rad Ranch shop's getting worked on. But I want to kind of go over a little summary of the track day, the things we learned, the things I'm going to change on the RADX7 moving forward, and ultimately what I thought were good ideas, but we ended up growing out of them very quickly. So, engine and drivetrain wise, the summary. I money shifted the car 232 one time. Now I didn't like fully let the clutch out completely and done break everything, but it did see 9,200 RPM. That's less than ideal. So I'm gonna start doing some research on a better shifter option for the RX-8 Trans, even though in the green car I didn't really have any issues with it. I think just without all the rubber boots and stuff on it, it's a little bit more finicky. Engine wise, the thing rips. The car does not need any more horsepower. It makes plenty of power. I've got a slight, little hesitation whenever I first get into boost, the very first time I turn on the key. Sometimes it shows up in the log as a little RPM dip, but I can't see anything that's necessarily causing it, so I don't know. I did have one of my screws on the front full function engineering trigger wheel up here. One of those did back its way out, so there's only 3 of them in there. I put some Loctite on them, put them back in. I got to figure out, another screw to put in that. But first time, really raging on it. Things are going to come loose, right? No fuel leaks. My catch can situation was basically the hardest thing we had to deal with all day besides cooling. And I need to pull the pan off, do some baffling, build a better catch can, probably put it over there on the fender so it's not right behind the radiator, transitioning straight to cooling. The clutch fan here was more or less just like a, hey, we need to go to Deals Gap in 2 weeks and I need a way to keep this car cool. So I put the clutch fan on. I'd like to keep the clutch fan just for the simplicity, but I'm going to have to see if I have an extra output on my fuel tech so that I can run electric fans. If not, I can put them on a switch. On the track, you don't necessarily need your electric fans running while you're driving around the track, more so just like to kick them on for cool down, so it could be manually controlled, but yes, ideally the fuel tech controls that based off of temperature. Need to sort out a better overflow container, even though this one's actually working fairly well, and then cooling system ducting. Intake air temps, I didn't see much over 100, 105 the whole day. So, ambient air temp was 70, and that's not that bad for probably not a super high quality intercooler, and then just
The reason to pick up cold air from under the fender, my air filter is way down here in front, is exactly that. You don't have to work as hard to cool it if you're sucking up colder air. So, transitioning to suspension and brakes. This is probably where I can make the most improvement on the car as far as lap times and just the overall feel. The biggest thing that I didn't like about the car at the track so far, even at Polecat and at NCM, is the brakes. The front brakes have way too much power. The rear brakes, I need more rear brake bias. So it's hard for me to modulate my brakes at the limit. Now, I know this car is super light. It doesn't have ABS, and we do have a smaller tire patch on the ground than the RX-8, which has ABS and bigger tires and arguably like much better brakes. But this master cylinder was not designed to run the Turbo 2 4-piston brakes in the front, and then I have stock GSL SE brakes in the back. So you got to think, this master cylinder was built for a small disc brake up front and a drum brake in the rear. Now you're like, why did he even consider doing that at the beginning? Well, on the street, this had been the best setup or the best feel that we had gotten out of this car when it was formerly known as Death Trap, and then the white turbo first gen, which has FC front brakes as well. So pushing it to the limits, the feel isn't there for sticky tires and all of that. So I think definitely need some sort of floor mounted pedal box or hanging pedal box assembly so I can size the master cylinders appropriately to get the best brake feel for the car. Just make it completely new, dialed in for this setup. As far as suspension, as you saw, the front Techno Toy tuning sleeves are rubbing a little funny. They rattle. I need to get different camber plates. So I'm going to start working on a suspension solution for unlocking more adjustability in the suspension. Now, a couple things that come to my mind just off the rip for you guys to consider is that this car has a straight axle in the rear and it's McPherson strut style in the front. So if you look at very popular cars that are McPherson strut, the first one that comes to my mind is the S chassis Nissan. So an S13, S14, S15, they have a McPherson style strut front end. So I may look at trying to retrofit S chassis spindles, brakes, the whole deal to the front of this using the rack and pinion subframe that I have, or I'm going to look at building a new subframe to be able to run S chassis stuff on this car. It's not something that's horribly uncommon. I've seen it done before, people using S chassis subframes on these cars when they do like a SR20 swap or a JZ swap in a first gen. However, there's really no like main parts you can buy off the shelf to make that work. Now, as far as the rear, when you go to say an S chassis or an AE86, which is another McPherson strut front, you can use the rear shocks from either of those cars, which are fairly simple with how they mount, and retrofit that to the back of the first gen. So that's kind of where my head is at as far as upgrades for this right now with regards to brakes and suspension. I really want to try to keep the straight axle until I like blow up the diff or break it, just for the sake of like not many people are going to want to IRS swap their first gen. So for a street car, being able to make this work is going to benefit you guys more, learning about the straight axle, you know, versus jumping straight to something that I know would work around a road course, which is an S chassis whole rear subframe. And the guy that's in the UK, I believe, on Instagram, his thing is like Time Attack FB, has a super sick black first gen, and he has a S chassis, like basically front and rear stuff on his car. So his is wider and, you know, basically a fully built Time Attack K series first gen. But I've learned a lot from seeing the pictures of him building that about setting up the rear. So the last thing, fuel system. Short answer, I need a surge tank. So with that, I want to thank you guys so much for watching the video. Thank you guys so much for the support with the move and getting all the cars going here. And just, it's been a hectic last 8 weeks. If you haven't seen that, the Rad Ranch is moving from one location to a new location. So go check out the previous video on the channel. And I'm excited because now that the track day is done, a majority of my stuff has moved. As you can see, I've got a whole slew of projects lined up for you guys coming in the next couple weeks that I get to get started on now. So, red FC, yellow RX-8, black FD, and a few more fun secret projects that I think you guys are going to be super surprised to hear about whenever I drop the news to you. So, If you want to see all the stuff going on in the background, or if you have questions specifically about your car, your builds, you just want to get in touch with me directly, go check out the Rad Potential Patreon. Super awesome group of guys over there. They get videos every week answering all of their questions about their specific cars and specific engine things. Last week we were talking about J-ports and doing porting on a REW for boost, so looking at overlap and stuff like that. Really just kind of thinking and talking those things out in order to help them better understand where they want to direct their build, in addition to the behind the scenes stuff, which is basically, because I'm filming a Patreon video, you just get to see the stuff that's in the background. So definitely go check out the Patreon. Would much appreciate your guys' support over there in trying to take Rad Potential 100% full-time, 110% of my effort. So with that, the RADX7 shreds. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you guys so much for subscribing. We'll see you guys in the next one. Keep it rad. Quit being distracted. I know this isn't the Rad Ranch. There's cars everywhere. Come on. Hey. Jump. Is the RADX7 faster than the RX-8? What? Come on. Hey, too far. Come here. We're not ending this video until you jump. Is the RADX7 going to be faster than the RADX8? Come on. Hey. Come here. Jump. This is what happens when you leave your dog at home for the whole weekend while you're away at the track. She's just so excited about everything. She doesn't want to jump. So maybe, I guess she's telling us that the RX-8 will be faster than the RX-7 around the track always, but not if I can do anything about it. Peace, guys.